Good afternoon. Can you hear me? No. Give us a little more. I need a little more sound upstairs, Eric.
Just talk closer to the mic.
Test 1, 2. There we go. All right. Welcome to our noon lunch talks. Thank you. What a great turnout. Today I am going to introduce our photographer, speaker, cousin. I've watched him grow up since he was a youngster. One of my first memories was with his sister hand in hand running away from home. And I was operating a road grader, putting the driveway in and the parking area for Steck's down off of 17th Street. And here come these two little rascals with one suitcase between them. And I stopped the patrol and got off, and I says, "Where are you going?" And, well, we're running away from home. And I said, "Well, they're a block away. That's not bad." Anyway, about that time, I saw this car come around the corner in a big hurry, and Mother is on the way. And so we visited, and she loaded him in the car and took him home. But I don't know what happened. I didn't get the whole story. But Mack has been not only a relative, but a friend for years growing up. And his dad and mother were friends. Mack's dad helped my father start the Cody Times and did all the artwork for it. And Mack's mother is a wonderful artist, along with Jess Frost. And of course his grandfather, Ned Frost, was a partner with my granddad and married a sister to my granddad's wife. And so we're tied together many ways. And I always say never speak poorly about the Richards or Frost, because I'm related to them all. But anyway, Mack has guided for me when I had grub stake tours and expeditions for over 30 years. He did bus tours, step-on bus tours in Yellowstone. He excelled in one-family tours, had people from all over the world on his tours. And I always got such great reviews. And along with that, he was always photographing over the shoulders of the guests or showing them how to take good pictures. He was educated, got his degree in Bozeman at MSU. He went to Central Wyoming College. He was a newscaster here in Cody and elsewhere. But best of all, he's been a friend to me, and he's now working here digitizing historic collections and putting them online. And it's a privilege to introduce Mack Frost. Mack, it's yours.
Well, I could probably tell a few tales about Bob, too, but that would take up too much time. So we will dispense with that. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. This is a really great crowd, and I see a lot of friends and acquaintances out there and a few cousins scattered about as well. So this is pretty nice. Give me just a moment here while I get things settled. You know, there's not enough room here to use a mouse. I understand we're going to get a new lectern one of these days. And okay, I have a little video to show you first, largely because I've already got it made and it's got a lot of my better pictures on it. So bear with me and just sit back and enjoy. I put that together a number of years ago as one of the slideshows that we did for open range images, and we would probably do that this year, except for the fact that we're still dealing with COVID. So, and I'm pleased to see so many people out here today wearing masks. And I'll tell you right now, I have been thrice vaccinated. So, in any event, thank you very much for that recognition, and we'll move on now. Let's see here. I can remember how to do this. Whoops. We have alluded to this, the fact that we are cousins, and we ran around together in Yellowstone National Park. This, as you can see, was taken at Sylvan Lake, and it was back in my more fuller days. In any event, Bob and I had a great time together, and I miss it in a way, but in a way I don't miss it. It was a lot of stress squiring the people around the park, doing a running commentary all the time that you're driving and driving in the park. There's a lot of stress, so what can I say? Let's see here. There we go. This is my grandfather, Ned Frost. He arrived here in the Cody area in 1885 as a 4-year-old boy, and the rest, as they say, is history. He started off in as a hunting guide, and later got into, well, I suppose actually he actually became a photographer first, and then he got into hunting. In the old days, my great-grandfather Malin and his older brother Jesse started a stage stop south of town called the Halfway House. It was on the Red Lodge to Lander stage line. And one of the first guests that came out was this Frenchman who wanted to take pictures of lots of game in the area, especially the elk and whatnot. So Malin said, Ned, you're his assistant. You go out and help him. Well, this is back in the days of wet plate photography. You had to take out a dark tent, set everything up, get everything all ready to go into the dark tent, mix up your chemistry, coat the emulsion onto a glass plate, and while it was still wet, take it out and expose it. And then carry it back into the dark tent and develop it on site. This is what William Henry Jackson did when he took all those fabulous pictures in the 1871 Hayden expedition. And then later on, after they were all done with the taking pictures of the wildlife and whatnot, the Frenchman said, all I really need to take home with me are these glass plate negatives. You've been such a good help. You may have, as a tip, all the rest of the glass plates and chemistry and the camera. And from that day forward, my grandfather was a photographer. It wasn't too long after that, thank God, that they came up with the dry plate method. And you still had to mix up your own chemistry or emulsion and coat it onto the glass plate, but you could allow it to dry, and you could carry it around in a dark box and use it, expose it, and then take it back to your darkroom and develop it at your leisure. This is the process by which Charles Belden took the vast majority of his pictures. So this was the old ranch house. The bearded gentleman on the left there is my great-grandfather Malin. That's his wife, Nancy Ward Frost. My grandfather is in the hat over here on the right, and he has his hand on the shoulder of his nephew, Jack Frost. Yes, there really is a Jack Frost. And there was precedent in my family to have named me Jack, but my folks weren't that sadistic, so they named me Maxwell after my mother's maiden name. And Jack was the oldest son of Malin's oldest brother, Jesse, my great-uncle Jesse Frost, for whom my father was named. Finally, they got around to inventing roll film photography, and my grandfather was never more happy than that when he was able to take a small and more compact camera with him. Here he is with his hunting partner and brother-in-law, Fred Richard. And if you'll look closely, they're up on what's called Eleanor Creek, which is on the other side of, it's on the Grable River side of Carter Mountain. This is Carter Mountain back here in the background. And if you look very carefully down here in the corner, just what I need. I keep telling everybody to turn their their sound off, but I forgot to do it myself. Down here in the corner, we have Ned. There's a little string right there. He is actuating the shutter of the camera. This is a 1904 selfie. So as we mentioned, he was quite the hunting guide, and he did lots of photography. He even got in very early in the game into wildlife cinematography, and had an old Allsky camera, quite a bit like the one that Harold McCracken had. So he was known for rescuing animals. This was probably a young cub, black bear cub, that had been orphaned by the hunters. He also, as I said, was very much into photography and took lots of very interesting pictures and always had the latest camera. This is from probably about 1922. This is the 4th of July in Cody, Wyoming. It was taken from the deck of the Irma Hotel, the upper deck. And as you can see, everybody's getting ready for, they're all congregating down there after the parade has run. You can tell that this is a fairly early picture because people are still parking in the middle of Main Street. Let's see. This is the kind of camera that was taken with. I actually scanned that last image off of the long negative, which just barely fit onto the platen of my scanner, but it did. It worked. So this was an old panoramic camera made by Kodak. It has a swing lens in it, and what it would do is you click the shutter, it would open the lens shutter, and then the motor drive would swing the lens like that and expose the film along the curved back of the camera. And then later on you would go in and develop the film. And you could make contact prints with the negatives because they were so big. But panoramic photography is the kind of thing that I really enjoy doing. And I've gone out and I've taken lots of pictures in that mode. I didn't always start off that way. I started with a Yashica camera and eventually graduated to this. It's a professional level Canon systems camera called the F1. And it's kind of a knockoff of the Nikon F, but it was still a terrific camera and had great lenses. And I used that one pretty much to destruction, and I came up with the newer F1. It's almost identical except for the fact that it doesn't have a mechanical focal plane shutter. It has an electronic shutter. So other than that, they were pretty similar. The first time I ever used a digital camera was this little Hewlett-Packard. It's a point-and-shoot camera, had about a 38 to 70 millimeter zoom lens built into it, had an impressive, mighty 2.1 megapixel sensor in it. But it took pictures. And then I graduated to a slightly larger camera. This is a Kodak 6490. Has a 4 megapixel sensor in it and a 10x zoom lens built in. And I felt the need to progress a little bit, so here I am with the Canon S3, and it had a 12x zoom lens in it and a 6 megapixel. We're really getting up there, folks. Megapixel sensor. I decided it was finally time to get a real honest-to-goodness digital single lens reflex, similar in nature to the film cameras that I used, except that it has a digital sensor in there instead of film. And this is what has pretty much taken over the film industry, is a digital camera. This was the Canon T2i, and I was a little miffed at Canon because the day I got this in the mail, opened up the box and everything like that, and then looked at my internet, and lo and behold, Canon had just come out with the T3i, which had a swing lens, or a viewfinder on the back that folded out, and I would have definitely ordered that if I had known it was coming along, but I didn't, so I was a little irked with Canon at that point. So I made up for that with the Canon 80D not too long ago. It did have the swing out screen on the back of it, which makes it very, very easy to take pictures, especially if you want to hold it up like this or way down low. You can twist the the screen and still make a good picture that way. And my current camera is the 90D, and it's virtually identical to the 80D, except for the fact that the 80D has a 24 megapixel sensor in it, and the 90D has a 32 megapixel sensor in it. So we're getting higher and higher in resolution and sharpness, and if I wanted to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a camera body, I could get the Canon Mark V or Canon 5D Mark IV, which has a 64 or 63 megapixel sensor in it, and it's just getting too big, too much. Again, those of you who know me know that I like to take panoramic pictures, and one of the best spots that I have found is right out my back door. This is one of the 4 or 5 best views in Cody. My dad selected this particular lot back in late 50s, and it's up in the Highland Manor subdivision. We're right at the top of the 24th Street Hill, the big yellow house back on the edge of the hill, and great big picture windows and whatnot, and we look out on this view all the time. And you can see Rattlesnake Mountain over there on the left, Hart Mountain right in the center, and the McCullough Peaks off on the right, and our neighbors' trees on either end. Every once in a while, it provides us with a pretty darn good sunset, too. I call this particular picture my Albert Bierstadt sunset. This is one of the first and more successful panoramas that I took with film. I used my Canon F1 in on a 600 millimeter mirror lens, took 3 shots, and was going to print them up and sort of paste them together. But that is kind of a clunky way of doing a panorama, and it doesn't really look all that great. But once film scanners came along, I was able to digitize these things and put the picture together as stitch it in Photoshop and reimagine this whole thing. This, of course, is the Sleeping Giant up on Grinnell Creek. These are more typically known as the Grinnell Creek Cliffs. This great big thing back here in the background is Sleeping Giant Mountain. The clouds here are down in Mormon Creek, and then these are the cliffs. And I have always felt that the Sleeping Giant looks like a sleeping cat. He's got his feet off this way. Here's his ears, the hump of his back. Here's his tail, and Sleeping Giant Mountain. Some people have often thought that this is the head of the giant. Here's his nose. Here's his mouth open as he's snoring, his big pot belly, and his feet down on the bottom. So take your pick. I prefer the cat myself. Another shot that was taken using film, this time this is color negative film, and was able to very easily scan that using a Nikon CoolScan scanner, which is specifically designed to scan film, either negatives or slides. And it was taken from up on top of the McCullough Peaks at the big antenna farm up there. And it shows pretty much all of the Cody area. Let's see if I can get this to zoom in. Guess not. In any event, Cody's right down here. Rattlesnake. Here's Red Butte. This is Trout Peak. Patahara Peak, Patahara Mountain, Hart Mountain. Way off over the top of Bald Ridge, you can see Pilot and Index. This is the big pointy McCullough Peak. It's quite a view from up there. That big pointy peak is not the highest point in the McCullough Peaks. That's where the all the antennas are. That's the high spot. Finally, we get to an actual digital image. This was taken with that little Hewlett-Packard point and shoot camera. And it's interesting in the fact that it was a lot of fun to do. It was the very first time that I have ever actually tried to take a digital panorama. But for those of you who have ever been out on Artist Point, you'll know that right about here, there's a big old tree that's growing there. And I said, well, that's going to interfere with this sweeping panorama that I have in mind. So what I did is I took the first half of the picture over here, and then I moved the camera over to the other side of the tree and kept on shooting. And I could do that because across the river, there wasn't very much difference in the change of viewpoint from one side of that tree to the other, the parallax, as it were. And so the pictures meshed up perfectly, and we've got this fabulous shot of the 180-degree field of view of the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. Then later on with that 6490, I took this shot of the Oxbow Bend of the Snake River with Mount Moran in the background and all the trees in fall color. I've taken this picture many times. Just about every time I go over to the Jackson Hole country, I am incapable of going past this spot without taking a picture. This is one of the most photographed spots in the United States. You used to see it in every car commercial that came along, especially the high-end cars like Cadillac. With that same 6490 camera, I climbed up on the ridge line just to the south of the Olive Glen Golf Course. I saw this sunset coming along, and I prepared for it. I got up there early enough, got my camera all set up, my tripod, had everything all set and ready to go, and in the space of about 2 minutes, this sunset occurred. I call this my all-sky sunset, and it sweeps from the top of the Meeteetse Rim over here all the way over to the Pryor Mountains in the northeast. It's about a 210-degree field of view, and one of our typical lenticular cloud sunsets, and just very, very pretty, and it was a lot of fun. I swept this panorama twice. This was the first one. The second one, the sunset was already starting to fade. It didn't last very long, which is typical of pictures that time. This was taken at about the end of January. 2010, I think. One of my more popular saleable photos. I call this one Cold Heart. I was driving along on Stampede Avenue, headed for the post office, when all of a sudden I looked up and saw this thin cloud right across the front of Heart Mountain. And I said, well, that's pretty picturesque. So I quickly ran around and went out on the back of the hill behind the Riley Ice Arena and swept the picture. I did it handheld. But if you're careful about how you line things up, you can take your pictures pretty easily and then stick them into Photoshop and stitch them together. So that's how that happened. Finally up to the Canon S3. This was taken on in early February. The temperature was 4 degrees below zero. This is at Teton Point, which I think is probably the most photogenic spot on the Outer Rim Drive there at Grand Canyon. And I took this early, this is just before the sun came up. Then I've got a shot of the light just after sunrise on the mountains, and then a little bit later as it had brightened up into a white light. This is probably my most, one of my longer panoramas. This is Carter Mountain. This is all of Carter Mountain. And it was a lot of fun. I had kind of waited for the light to get right. This was in early April when I took this picture, and it stretches from the eastern end of Carter Mountain all the way over to Castle Rock, which is right here. And I thought, wow, this is pretty nice, and I'll bet I could get a great picture if the weather holds. I'm going to go up here on this hill right here. And I went and asked permission from Castle Rock Ranch, and they let me go up, and I took this shot. And this is Castle Rock from the backside with Carter Mountain in the background. This was a fun picture. It had been a very lucrative day photographically. I started out on Tatman Mountain out in the middle of the Bighorn Basin and out to the southeast of Meeteetse. It's, for all practical intents and purposes, the middle of the basin. It's the high spot in the basin, and it gives you a great field of view. We'll get into that here a little bit later on. But this particular picture came after I had not only been on Tapman Mountain, but then I drove up on top of the McCullough Peaks and took a number of great pictures up there. And then I went up to Bald Ridge and took pictures from the top of Bald Ridge, but on the way up I got this picture of what I call Red Hill. It's at the bottom of the switchbacks there on the Chief Joseph Scenic Highway. That particular June day was achingly green, as you can tell from this photograph. I have been known to take a few landscapes, but I don't let the animals pass me by, especially when they present themselves as neatly as this small herd of bison did. This is Fountain Flats in Yellowstone National Park. I was with some other photographers, and I hopped out of the car and ran around the side of it, and using my Canon T2i, had a nice 70 to 200 millimeter zoom lens on it, and I just stepped up and swept the picture left to right, holding it like this, click, 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 click. There's about 11 or 12 pictures in this particular panorama, and then they're all stitched together, and it turns out real nice. I have probably sold more of this particular picture than all the rest of my panoramas. Another animal picture. This was coming down on the last day that Yellowstone National Park was open to travel through the East Gate before they closed it for the winter. This is the Copperleaf Subdivision. It's actually the front 40 acres of the old Frost and Richard Ranch. And this was the view that we had, and I've managed to catch this picture a couple of times. There's actually more than 100 elk in this picture, but that's what I call the thing. There's 100 elk. And there's more than 100 elk in this particular herd, but off on the right side of it was a big old telephone pole holding up the power lines, and I didn't want that in the picture, so I just cropped it where it's at. One of my more recent pictures, this was done with the 90D. That was back in October up on the South Fork. This is just before you drop down into the bottom of the river, just beyond the Beartooth Ranch, and it's a nice. This is just to the west of Lucille Patrick's place, if you all know where that's at. And then there's one final panorama that I took. I took this morning with this camera. I just stepped out on the back of the hill and swept the panorama. There's a panorama mode built into most cell phones nowadays, and it's remarkable how some of the the high-end cameras, cell phones that they sell nowadays, they take really great pictures, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're using an iPhone or a Samsung or a Sony or whatever. If you've got if it's got a good lens in it, then it's going to take good pictures. So, okay, I'm done with this batch. Check my time here. Some of these pictures we've seen. I'm going to jump into a little bit further. This is a group of pictures that I have been assembling. I call these my widescreen savers because they are designed to be used on a 16:9 ratio monitor for a computer, or practically every digital television set that's sold nowadays is 16:9 ratio. So I put these all together. Some of them are slightly smaller because they were taken as 35 millimeter, and that's a 3:2 aspect ratio. And I didn't want to crop the picture, so I just have them letterboxed like this with black on the side. This particular shot was back during the fires of '88, and it's the sun setting behind White Mountain up in. This was taken from the very top of Dead Indian Pass. Dewey was with me when we took this picture. He had a broken leg at that time, too. He tried to contest the right-of-way with a pickup truck at the bottom of the Taggart Hill. There's just a few minutes later, there's a sunset right into the top of the mountain. And if you look real careful, right here, that little black spot is a sunspot on the surface of the sun. And this was as the sun was setting down through the clouds of smoke from the fires of '88. I gave this particular picture to the Center of the West, and Nancy McClure has used it numerous times in advertising. And you see it every once in a while scattered around the confines here of the Buffalo Bill Center of the West. Out in the garden when the statue of Sacagawea was in a different location. Another shot of the Scout. Good old St. Bill, our patron saint. These are the volcanic spires that are up in front of Black Mountain, just to the west of Trout Creek. It's up above the Broken H Ranch, where the little post office is now on the North Fork. This is Black Mountain on the right, and of course Jim Mountain there in the center. And this is that great big tall spire of volcanic rock that you can see from the highway. And a little bit different from up there. And I wish I had had somebody with me, especially in a red jacket, to stand at the base of this thing, because then you give an idea of just how big it is. It's a picture that I took on that trip from Tapman Mountain. This is when I was up on top of the McCullough Peaks, right next to the antenna farm. I took that shot, and then a couple of hours later, I took this picture up on Bald Ridge. And the big tall mountain there in the background is Trout Peak from the north side. These pictures are in no particular order. They're just however I dropped them into the widescreen savers. They're all numbered sequentially. And I haven't actually marketed this screensaver system yet, but I probably will. There'll probably be a few requests out of this group. Here's Patahara Peak. This is that pointy part up there is the west end of Patahara. It's actually called Moon Crest on the USGS maps, and you can see the moon setting in the early morning, right after sunrise, as it sets. Now you know why they call that mountain Moon Crest. It's because from the Cody side, the moon sets up there during the winter, and it also sets up there in the summertime as a sliver-thin crescent. So just depends on the time of the year, but it sets up there quite often. Have you ever seen Yellowstone Lake as a mirror? This is at Steamboat Point, looking south back at Lake Butte Overlook. Just a calm lake. You'd never know that it can raise 4-foot waves, when the wind blows. This is one of my more planned pictures that I took, and I've sold a lot of this one too. I call this one the Horsehead Moon, or Horsehead Eclipse. The moon is in partial eclipse as it was setting the upper end of the South Fork. There's the Horse's Head snowbank. And, of course, Castle Rock. I had known that this eclipse was going to be happening for many years in advance. I have a book. It's called A Canon of Lunar Eclipses. I have one for solar eclipses, too. You can also look this stuff up online. It's very easy to do. The guy who wrote the books, Fred Espenack, has his own web page. You can find out about eclipses anytime, and where they're going to be visible, when they're going to be visible, and then you just use a good ephemeris photography program. The photographer's ephemeris was the one I used on this one to line up the position from where you want to observe to put a celestial object like the moon or the sun right behind whatever object it is that you want there. And having figured that all out, I knew that I needed to be up at this location at 5:30 in the morning on the 6th of June, no, the 4th of June in 2012. And I was there. And about 10 minutes later, I was leaving because I'd gotten the picture. It's really fun when something like that comes together. Kirk knows just exactly what I'm talking about. He and I both use another program called Photo Pills. And it's only available as a cell phone application. You can't get it yet on your laptop, but it's highly accurate. It's very good. A lot of fun. This is a shot of the clouds and everything over the Beartooth Mountains. This is not too far from the border with Wyoming and Montana on the Belfry Highway. Here's another one of those lenticular sunsets. Elk Fork. This is where Elk Fork runs into the North Fork of the Shoshone. It's a major tributary of the Shoshone River. It's in the fall. I walked out on the bridge to take this picture. As you can probably tell from seeing the water run underneath me there. But from the bridge, it's the only place on the entire road where you can see the formation known as Four Men on a Bobsled up here on the... And I've got a picture later on in this presentation that'll show you that a little bit closer. The chief, or the pinnacle, or the sleeping Indian, whatever you want to call it, that's what this great big pinnacle of rock is up on the western end of Carter Mountain as you go up on the upper South Fork. Find the U.S. flag in this picture. This is the top of Flag Peak. And if you look way over here, this is the last time that I know of that they actually put the flag up there on the peak. This was during the gun barrel fire. And I went way up on Green Creek and looked back over all these ridges and whatnot. This is Monument Mountain. This was a fun panorama to put together. I was asked to help photograph the 100th anniversary of the completion of the Buffalo Bill Dam. This was on January 16th in 2010. And you may have seen some articles on Facebook here recently. We just passed that anniversary again here just a few days ago. Let's see here. This was fun because I actually took 4 rows of pictures. There's one down on the bottom that has the lake, then there's the one that has the dam, and then there's one up above that has all the cliffs and the sky and whatnot. This entire area was in shadow from Cedar Mountain. And I knew that because of that, I could take these pictures a few minutes, or as it turned out, about an hour apart. I'd taken these pictures down here an hour before the crowd gathered on the view stand there. And then I climbed up on a ladder in the back end of the pickup there on the as far out as I could get towards the edge of the lake, and shouted at everybody to line up, make sure that your head is showing, look at me, and don't move. And I just went click, 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 click. 17 shots later, I was down at the end of the There we go. And that's as big as I can get it on this particular machine. But I'd like you to look. You can see, if you look in there very closely, you can see people that you know. One of them is sitting in this room right now. Senator Al Simpson, right there. And there's his son-in-law, John Gallagher, holding his daughter. So this was a lot of fun, and we printed up a great big poster, mural-sized poster of this picture, and it's hanging in the visitor center there at the Buffalo Bill Dam. I have to reduce this in size. It took about 10 hours for Photoshop to stitch that whole batch of pictures together, but it did it flawlessly. So I was really happy about that. This is a picture taken from up on top of the McCullough Peaks. This is the Bureau of Reclamation, I'm sorry, the BLM road that goes across the top of the McCulloughs. It's a perfectly serviceable dirt road. You can drive up there in your family car. And it gives you a rather commanding view of Cody, the northern end of the Bighorn Basin over to Powell and the Pryor Mountains. And then if you look back across the top of the Big McCullough, you can see across the top of Bald Ridge, there's Pilot and Index again. And we're going to get a shot of those here again in just a few moments. I'll try and speed this up because we're getting along here on hours. Is everybody okay? All right. This is Cody Peak up above Pahaska Teepee. This is inside Yellowstone National Park. They when they were first starting to bring people up there to Pahaska Teepee, they asked Buffalo Bill, well, what's the name of that mountain? He says, well, it doesn't have a name. And they said, well, it does now. It's Cody Peak. And it stuck. If you ever have the chance to go over to Idaho, drive the, this is Idaho 33, if I remember correctly. This is runs from Ashton, Idaho, over to Teutonia, and then on to Driggs and Victor. This is one of the most scenic roads in the state of Idaho, I think. It's just absolutely fabulous. You've got all these wheat fields and potato fields, and these views of the what I like to call the backside of the Tetons, but it's not, of course. It's the name. It's the side of the mountains from which the Tetons were named, because they were named by the French trappers that used to gather in Pierre's Hole there on the Idaho side of the mountain during their rendezvous. And they looked up at those mountains, and of course they were sexually starved Frenchmen. And they said, ah, les trois Tetons, which literally translated is the three breasts. So that's how the Tetons got their name. More typical view. And I think the people who own this ranch park these horses out there just for the scenic quality, because you never see them being ridden. They're just out there eating grass and posing for the photographers. Like I said, moonsets up there all the time. And this is a photograph that was taken with my, let's see, I guess it doesn't really make any difference. It was with a long lens, and it was taken from my backyard. This was right after the moon had gone through a total lunar eclipse. And it was a mighty fine night, let me tell you. Another shot that from a place that I like to go to. This is just past the bottom of the Andy Martin Hill, and looking up the South Fork, and past Castle Rock, and you can see the Horse's Head snowbank up there on the side of Scoria Creek, which runs into Ishwa Creek, which runs into the South Fork of the Shoshone. A little bit closer picture of it. And every year, as the wind and the sunlight melt out the snowbank, the Horse's Head appears. And when the reins are cut or the throat is slit on the horse, that's traditionally the end of high water on the South Fork, and that's typically around the time that the old-timers say that you can finally get over the passes into the backcountry, into the thoroughfare. You'll go up there before that, and you're screwed. Or you're going to have to dig out a lot of snow going over Deer Creek Pass. That's all I got to say. What time is the Horse's Head visible? It usually comes out in sometime in May, and is usually visible like that until the middle of June, and then it starts to deteriorate pretty fast after that. Willow Flats with the Tetons in the background. Here's a wider angle view of the whole thing. Yeah, I went over a couple of years ago and spent 2 whole days just wandering around in Jackson Hole, taking nothing but scenics and fall foliage shots. It was a lot of fun. Got kind of monotonous after a while because there's so much beauty to be seen over there. So here's that scene again. This is done with more modern equipment. Reflection shot of Mount Moran. Mount Moran from a different angle and different aspen trees in front of it. This one is sold fairly well. This is at Schwabacher Landing. There's a turnoff along Highway 89 there, just to the south of Teton Point. You drive down this paved stretch of road, and it eventually turns into a dirt road and goes out to a group of vault toilets and Schwabacher Landing. And the path is very well worn. These beaver ponds have been there for quite some time and are very photogenic just about any time of day, especially if there's some clouds in the sky. This is Mintock Park. It's just one of those times, driving home, getting ready to go up the 24th Street Hill, and was driving right into this beautiful rainbow. And of course, the best camera that you can use to take a picture is the camera you have with you. So it doesn't make any difference what camera you're using. As long as it'll take a decent picture, you're going to get a good photograph. So always carry a camera with you. If nothing else, use your cell phone. This was the Quit Fire a few years ago when it burned up over the top of Sheep Mountain and down onto the South Fork. And you could see Castle Rock in the off there in the distance underneath all the clouds of smoke. That was a lot of fun. Top Notch Mountain up above Sylvan Lake. Typical with its winter cover. This is a nice shot. It was actually taken as a color shot, again with that little Canon S3. And I just walked out on the berm of rocks and granite and everything at this one turnout. And this was in May, and shooting into the sun. It was almost a monochromic photograph to begin with. There was very little color in this picture. So I thought, well, what the heck, let's just drop all the color out and turn it into a black and white. Another example of F8 and B there. That means, be ready to take the picture when it happens. I was driving back from Billings one evening after a doctor's appointment and was watching the full moon ever since I came up above the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone there at the hill south of Belfry, just to the south of the cemetery. And I looked over my shoulder, and there was the full moon rising, and I just kept watching it. And as I drove along, I thought, wow, the moon's going to line up with the pimple on the chin of Hart Mountain if I drive carefully enough. So I did, and I just positioned myself, and lo and behold, there it was. So I got the shot. Again, Sylvan Lake. This was during a late, let's see, I guess it was in October. It was a snowstorm. It was sleeting and raining, and I could tell that it wasn't going to be much use to go further into the park. So I just stopped and took a few pictures here, and this turned out to be a fairly photogenic experience. And then you drove down to the bottom of Sylvan Pass, and it wasn't snowing or sleeting anymore. This is another shot that I had planned and used photo pills to line everything up, but I almost missed this picture. My truck conked out on me, and I had to borrow my sister's car, and it had snowed the night before, And there was about 4 inches of heavy snow on the highway, the road running out to this. This is on lane 20, out on the east side of Hart Mountain. And I arrived just moments before this picture happened. I very quickly set up my tripod, got my camera out, put the big telephoto lens on, slapped it on the tripod, focused the image, and took the picture. Boom. And then it started to set down and roll down the backside of Hart Mountain. I got a number of shots off of that, but that was the very first one. And again, that is the moon in total eclipse. Just getting ready to come out of totality, but it's still totally eclipsed there. Love those lenticular slides. There we go, lenticular clouds. Taken from the big straightaway on Chapman Bench on the north side of Hart Mountain. This is not too far from where I took that other picture of the moon in Hart Mountain, but with a sliver-thin crescent. And I took a number of shots, but I thought that this one said it all. It looked better with the moon partially blocked by the mountain than just floating free above it. It lent a little bit of extra oomph to the picture. Out in front of my house during the, let's see, it was one night when I was taking pictures of the planets. Let's see, it was Venus and the Pleiades, and they were setting off to the northwest, and the moon was full, and there was this thin layer of clouds going over the top of it and providing this ring around the moon. Here's that picture of Venus up in the upper center, the Pleiades star cluster setting over the top of Hatteharan Mooncrest. And the ground below has been illuminated by the full moon. This is another thing that modern day digital cameras can do for you, is they can expose pictures at very high sensitivity, ISO, and you can come up with these really great pictures that you only used to be able to get with high-speed film, and not very well at that. Was chasing a full moon, trying to get it to come up over the top of Blacktail, let's see, Beartooth Mountain and Mount Wolsey, but the clouds were in the way and didn't really see the moon until it was up here. This is Cloud Peak, the top of the Bighorns. This is taken from the top of Eagle Pass. So the next night I went out to the west of Ralston and set up my camera gear and took the shot that I was trying to get the night before. And there's a waning gibbous moon as it comes up behind Blacktooth and Mount Wolsey. Just a few more of these to go, and then we'll wrap things up. This was 2020 on the road going up to Lily Lake, and a nice little bunch of aspen that had turned color. And this is down at the bottom of the Lily Lake Road. There's a little kind of it's a bermed-in pond, backed up a small creek, and there's a little pond in there. And I took the shot of the reflections, and I thought it looked better if it upside down. This is in Yellowstone National Park in the Lamar Valley. This is right next to the Buffalo Ranch. That is Rose Creek there at the bottom of the picture, and the corrals that held the buffalo when they were raising the buffalo there in the ranch back in the turn of the century, the 1900s. A big old stand of wind-blown aspen trees up on the side of U.S. Highway 212, going up towards the top of the Beartooth Mountains. This is on the upper Clark's Fork, that pluton of granite out there in the background, and a nice grove of aspen and cottonwood in fall color. Again, a picture from a slightly different angle of the pinnacle, or the chief, as I like to call it. This is another picture that I knew was going to happen, but wasn't sure just exactly where it was going to happen. I drove up the North Fork, and the further I got up, I realized that, let's pull off the side of the road here right in front of Bill Cody's Ranch Rest and the old Name It Creek Lodge, and just waited for the moon to drop down into the shot there. That's the old woman in her cabin up above the Holy City. This was, let's see, 2020, and this is back when the bright star up there is Jupiter, the next brightest one is Saturn, and then the crescent moon down below. This is out on Frost Lane. That was Nedward Malin Frost's house. We all knew him as Chew. He was my uncle. And he more or less took over Granddad's hunting operation after he came back from the war, World War II. And it was all lit up by the people who own it now for Christmas. And a few days later, the two planets moved together and formed what we were all calling the Christmas star that year. Now this is a fun one. This is another one that I had planned. I knew precisely where I needed to be and to get this picture. I took a series of pictures as the moon came up behind the big McCullough. But before the moon rose, I took a picture of the big McCullough without anything in the sky above it and the last light of the sun. And then I took that image and I masked it so that I had just the mountain, and then I dropped it in and merged it over the top of this picture. So don't blink. Photographs do not lie, but the photographer do. Looking down Main Street. These two pictures, that last one and this one, were taken at the same time. I just shot down the street, and then you can see the construction that was going on down there at the other end of Main Street at the time. And I actually took this picture and I flipped it 180 degrees because I wanted to present the flag, both flags, like you would normally see them in the proper way, but this is actually backwards. Another shot. This is the flags out in front of the Center of the West. A number of years ago, we had an October storm going on, and it was providing this, there was this rainbow going on, and it lasted for hours. It was amazing. This storm just hung up over the, in front of a rattlesnake and created this wonderful, very vivid rainbow. I call this picture All the Colors. Just about at the end of this sequence, this was just earlier this year, I had wanted to go out and take pictures of the sun setting down behind Pilot Peak. And I was all set and ready to get this picture taken, but when I got out on the end of Bald Ridge, I found that the little side trail that I wanted to use had been blocked off by the Forest Service to preserve the integrity of the tundra up there. So, being a model citizen, I decided not to go out there in my car and chew up the ground again. So I went back to a spot. I parked my car on the road and walked over to the edge of the canyon, looking down into the gorge of the Clark's Fork of the Yellowstone. And I took this shot as the sun was setting and resulted in this picture. And I'm going to let you know that, let's see, this picture won 3rd place in landscape photography in this year's Wyoming Wildlife Photography Contest. Thank you. And it also has been chosen as a possible finalist in Outdoor Photography's Colors of Nature contest, and if I win in that one, it's going to be a nice payday. This was the next night. I was trying to duplicate the picture to get the sun setting down behind Pilot and Index, and it would have worked, but I was a day late. It didn't set behind it, it set on the side of it. And so if I had been up there on the night that I took that last picture, I would have gotten the shot that I was after. But, oh well. There's always next year, if there's a, if there's a fire. So here's my second attempt at the picture of Elk Fork in the fall. And this time, instead of having an overcast day, we had a nice, bright, sunny, almost cloudless day. And you can again see up there on the side of the ridge the 4 men on a bobsled. And then earlier in my travels, I took a closer picture of it. And again, as you're going up the North Fork, heading towards Yellowstone, as you go across the bridge, look up there on the side of the hill. It's the only place you can see it. Unless you drive into the Elk Fork campground. You can see it from there, too. Another one of these fabulous lenticular sunsets taken from right behind my house. This is the same sunset just a few minutes later. Some of you may actually recognize that particular picture as my Christmas card this year. And this was back in the early part of December when we had a number of lenticular sunsets that were just really pretty fantastic. So, let's see here. I'm going to wrap things up with another little video. I hope you'll forgive me for running over just a little bit. I have always been fascinated not only with clouds, but with the moon. I really enjoy taking pictures of the moon setting or in some kind of spectacular situation. So I put together a little video which I call Light of the Moon. And it's pictures of the moon in various phases, as well as landscapes illuminated by the moon. Thank you. That's pretty much the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Let me turn the lights on here. Ta-da. So Bob and I will be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I think it's a great tour. Great photography. Mack, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll bring the mic up so we can see. All of this has been recorded. You're going to be in posterity here.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. That was absolutely stunning photography, and I'm just amazed.
Sorry for running over.
Oh, hey, no, it's perfect. But quick question, because I noticed your progression through the technology of photography for all of these years, and now, of course, you've seen it yourself, where you show up somewhere and there's a herd of people taking pictures, and you'll notice a lot of the photographers are going with these mirrorless cameras. You have any experience with that, or you haven't started fooling with them yet? Or?
Not yet. We do have a couple of mirrorless cameras here at the center. We're using them mainly to do interviews, record video interviews. They're Sony Alpha 650s. They're 6500s. I'm sorry, and they don't have a reflex mirror that flips up and then the shutter opens. You expose your picture on the sensor, and then the shutter closes and the mirror flops back down. That's where the reflex comes from. But these mirrorless cameras, they just have a shutter in front of them, and that opens up, and it's quite a bit silent. There isn't any mechanical motion involved, and it makes for a less mechanical camera, so it's a little bit easier to build, and it's also quite a bit lighter than the older reflex cameras. So there's a lot of advantages to that, and it seems to be the wave of the future. Unfortunately, none of the lenses that I have for my regular cameras will fit on these new cameras, so I'm reluctant to get one because I have to buy all these lenses again. And we're talking, like $7,000 or $8,000 or $9,000 worth of just basic lenses. So, yeah. But they're pretty darn nice cameras. They're getting really extremely well engineered. Anybody else? All right.
Thank you very much. Please join us upstairs in the bookstore. Bob Richard will be signing books. We'll see you up there. Thanks very much for coming.